Developed by Ubisoft Montreal and published by Ubisoft, Assassin's Creed Valhalla is the 12th major installment to the franchise and the successor to Assassin's Creed Odyssey. While it's not widely considered to be the favorite among the franchise due to various reasons, it is Ubisoft's most successful commercially released Assassin's Creed, selling over 25 million copies. Valhalla initially released on the PS4, Xbox One, Xbox Series X and S, Steam, and Stadia on the 10th of November 2020, followed by a PS5 release in North America and Australia 2 days later on the 12th of November 2020, then globally on the 19th of November 2020 to line up with the respective releases of the next-gen consoles. Before I continue, please be advised that there will be spoilers ahead, so watch at your own risk. Without further ado, let's get into the mythological lore behind Assassin's Creed Valhalla. Set in Norway in the year 855 AD, we are introduced to the game's main protagonist, a young Eivor Varanstotter, celebrating the new king of the Raven clan Styrbjorn with him and his family until rival warlord Kjotve the Cruel attacks the Raven clan's hometown, killing Eivor's parents, with Eivor witnessing such traumatic events before being saved by Sigurd. But their ride is cut short when one of Kjotve's warriors attacks their horse and Eivor is thrown onto and slides on the ice. While he crawls to his axe, a wolf shows up and attacks him before biting his neck. Eivor has a vision of the entrance to Valhalla before the wolf is spooked by the ravens, allowing time for Eivor to come to and retrieve the axe, killing the wolf. 17 years later, Eivor is adopted by Sigurd's family and continues down the path of vengeance until he is inevitably captured by Kjotve himself, where he taunts Eivor with his father's axe, where he died a coward in battle. Kjotve plans to sell him off as a slave, where he will die a lonely death. But just as I set to sail off, Eivor grabs the rope and pulls it to swing the mast and hit one of Kjotve's men. Then it comes down to a battle with Eivor being victorious against Kjotve's men. Eivor sets off to find and rescue his crew, running into some of Kjotve's men along the way. He runs into the first member of the Raven clan, Dag. They come to an agreement with Eivor searching the Longhouse while Dag storms the beach. Eivor reaches a settlement with the Longhouse and finds one of his clan members tied up and held hostage under Scandinavian Viking Rikki-Wolf. Eivor notices his father's axe in the presence of Rikki-Wolf and fights him for it. Once he takes him down with ease, Eivor wields the axe and relives the final moments of his father's death before seeing visions of Odin and Fenrir. However, Eivor daydreams for too long before Raven clan member Bragi calls out to him to snap out of it and free them from captivity. They head to the longship and set sail home to Fornburg. They arrive and Eivor speaks with Randvi, who was glad to see him in one piece. He asks about Sigurd and learns he'll be home later today if he's successful in his raiding. Eivor pays a visit to Valka the seer to get an answer on the visions he's been having. Valka's mother Savala is also in attendance until he learns she's close to being on her deathbed. Eivor begins describing the vision he had once he grabbed his father's axe to Valka when she mentions the High One. She begins brewing an elixir to help him transport to another dimension to vividly live and experience his visions. Once he's transported, he sees Sigurd. Confused, he follows him. Once Eivor gets through the gate and sees his brother in pain, Sigurd calls him Harvey when Eivor notices Sigurd's missing arm next to him. Eivor attempts to touch Sigurd until he's pulled away by a mysterious force. The mysterious force reveals himself to be Fenrir. Eivor then wakes up from the dream and begins telling Valka what happened. She tells him the meaning behind his vision is that he will betray Sigurd. Learning this information, he refuses to believe it and storms out. Eivor pays a visit to King Styrbjorn and he demands an explanation on why Eivor went after Kjotve once peace was made. Eivor responds that he was trying to give him confidence against his enemies until Styrbjorn fires back, saying, "You don't know anything of what I have planned." Eivor then mentions Sigurd when Styrbjorn says he knows his place. Styrbjorn begins explaining to him the business perspective behind being outnumbered by your enemies and says wouldn't being peaceful and gaining alliances work better in the long run rather than trying to cause a short-term war where no one wins? Styrbjorn continues on saying you'll understand in due time what I'm trying to achieve. He further continues saying he's shocked at the disrespect he's endured from Eivor since they took him in after his father's death, and begins gassing up his father. Eivor quickly retorts saying his father died a coward and refuses to live with such a stain on the family name. Their conversation is interrupted when Randvi notifies them of Sigurd's arrival. Eivor greets Sigurd and brings some special guests with him, Basim and Hytham, members of the Hidden Ones. Eivor talks to Sigurd about the conversation with Styrbjorn and expresses disagreement with his father's plan, while expressing hunger for wanting to also take down Kjotve. Sigurd talks to his father about taking down Kjotve and he agrees, when the time is right. Later in the night, Eivor is given a blade of the Hidden Ones, a present courtesy of Basim. Hytham then pipes up and expresses disagreement for such a thing, until Basim fires back saying all that matters is the mind of one who wields it. They head to the training area where Eivor learns how to use the blade and breaks it in. Sigurd and Eivor talk, and Eivor expresses his loyalty to him while he mentions his plans for taking over certain cities, such as England. Eivor wakes up from a nightmare to unwanted visitors from Kjotve's clan. He swiftly takes care of them and reports his findings to Sigurd and his father while they argue about fighting Kjotve. The boys form a plan to find Kjotve's fortress and end him once and for all. Styrbjorn expresses disappointment but can't do anything further. They set sail to Notfall and pillage Kjotve's supply wagons. Eivor returns to Sigurd and witnesses the arrival of Guthorm, the uncle to King Harald, until King Harald presents himself. He offers an alliance to prepare an attack against Kjotve. The boys accept, but under Sigurd's leadership. Eivor giving context, King Harald grants access to Sigurd's leadership. Eivor and Sigurd begin planning their assault on Kjotve's fortress, with Eivor fighting Kjotve one-on-one. Eivor speaks with Basim and learns their arrival was with intent to take down Kjotve as well. However, because Kjotve is more personal to Eivor, he expresses to Hytham that the target is Eivor's, to which Hytham accepts. They arrive at Kjotve's fortress and Eivor is face to face with Kjotve for the final time. Eivor finishes him off for good and comes face to face with Odin. Odin taunts Kjotve with his power of weather control and executes thunder. Eivor finishes off Kjotve for real this time. With Kjotve down, his son Gorm pipes up and wants war. Eivor powers through the fortress and finds Gorm, but he runs away and leaves the fortress on a horse. Eivor heads to Alrekstad and meets Sigurd. Eivor learns he has to share a room with Gorm and is disgusted to be in his presence. Sigurd tells him to leave it and honor King Harald's truce. Basim gives him advice as well as encouraging him to confront Gorm by disguising himself with the cloak. He sneaks past Gorm's men and attempts to set up a duel, but Gorm cowardly declines and hides behind the truce with King Harald. Gorm continues taunting Eivor, but he walks out. King Harald gives a speech and offers to unite the regions together as one and have him lead the charge. He begins asking if anyone disagrees, when King Hjor expresses disagreement and says he'll be finding land elsewhere. Gorm pipes up and agrees to be under his leadership when King Harald expresses his surprise for him still being present after the horrors that happened by his father Kjotve. Gorm responds with a lie saying the Raven clan poisoned his father. King Harald quickly shuts down such heinous claims and lets Eivor handle the consequence of such an action. Eivor chooses to have him banished because getting rid of him would be too easy. Styrbjorn then pipes up and bends the knee, submitting power to King Harald. Upon learning this, Sigurd is angry and scolds his father. Sigurd holds a meeting with fellow Raven clan members and expresses anger and frustration with his father's decision. He refuses to stay in Norway under King Harald's Boot of Peace and talks about leaving for England. Everyone present in Sigurd's meeting agrees with his plan to leave Norway. Before they leave, Sigurd is confronted by Styrbjorn and expresses disappointment for him leaving. Fast forward to present day with Layla Hassan, Sean Hastings, and Rebecca Crane. Layla listens to a news broadcast talking about the strengthening of the Earth's magnetic field causing communication issues globally. The crew have seemingly dug up remains of what seems to be Viking raider Eivor and leaves Layla with a lot of questions. Before Layla gets back in the Animus, she briefly stares at the staff of Hermes Trismegistus until she asks Rebecca to play a voice message that led to the discovery of Eivor's bones. She plays it and it's Basim sending a message to find them and save them from an impending doom. She goes back into the Animus and transitions back to Eivor and the Raven clan arriving into England and reaching the settlement of Halfdan Ragnarsson. Upon arriving though, they're greeted by a group of Saxon bandits who aren't too keen on their arrival and they battle to the death. Once Eivor takes care of them, he explores and finds hostages Yanni and Rowan. They welcome them into the Raven clan with open arms. They hold a meeting to discuss a name for the unknown settlement and agree on Ravensthorpe. Eivor speaks with Sigurd and Sigurd tells him to start securing alliances with neighbouring kingdoms to conquer England. Eivor begins the alliance journey by heading to Repton in Leicestershire to meet the sons of Ragnar Lothbrok, Ubba and Ivar. Eivor meets Ivar and realizes how much of a maniac he is, but looks past it to form an alliance. Ivar takes Eivor to meet Ubba and special guest Tunna briefly. The premise of this meeting is Ivar and Ubba are hunting King Burgred of Mercia because he wants war, but the brothers want peace and plan to replace his throne with Ceolwulf. Sigurd reiterates the intention behind his and Eivor's assistance, to form an alliance. Ubba assures an alliance once Ceolwulf is crowned the new king. They arrive at King Burgred's fortress when his right-hand man Leofrith basically tells him to bend the knee to them and submit his crown, but he doesn't give up his crown without a fight. They force their way through his fortress and take down his elites before entering King Burgred's keep to no sign of him. Upon searching, he finds a document with a certain sigil on it telling him of plans to have his throne overthrown and install Ceolwulf as the king. He takes his findings back to the sons and Ubba reveals the sigil to be Tunna's sigil. Learning this information, they head to Tunna's camp and confront her. She refuses to give up info without payments, and with Eivor refusing to pay her a dime, she gets cut and threatens to take care of them. Eivor, determined to find out the truth, sneaks into Tunna's camp and finds a letter from a servant of King Burgred offering to buy her loyalty in exchange for informing the monarch of if the places mentioned in the letter end up in the plans of the Ragnarsson. Learning this information, Eivor heads to Templeborough Fortress and confronts King Burgred's queen Eithelswith, but it turns out to be a decoy until Eivor captures the real one and brings her to the camp. After a lot of persuading, she inevitably gives up King Burgred's location, a crypt. Eivor reaches the crypt and explores it before finally finding King Burgred. After taking him down, Eivor kidnaps him and brings him back to his fortress. The ceremony takes place the next day, but Ceolwulf's son Ceolbert isn't present and Ceolwulf expresses concern. He is informed they sent word out but haven't heard anything and continue the ceremony with Ceolwulf crowned the new king of Mercia. With the ceremony out of the way, Eivor sets off to find Ceolbert. He finds him about to battle with Leofrith, who refuses to accept the new king of Mercia. Once Leofrith is slain by Eivor, he chooses to finish the job. Eivor brings Ceolbert back to his father, and Ubba gives Eivor a special bracelet to signal friendship and an alliance. Ivar gives Eivor his axe to try and one-up him as well. Eivor heads to Grantebridge in Grantebridgeshire and meets Soma. She was forced out of her town by the Order with 3 of her advisors missing and assures an alliance if she can retake the town of Grantebridge with her 3 advisors found and brought back to her. Eivor finds and rescues Soma's 3 missing advisors and they return to the camp, with the next step being to retake the town of Grantebridge. Before they take it back, Dag almost refuses to join the fight because it's not led by Sigurd, until Eivor says, "While you're on this ship, you fight for me and Soma's loyalty." They arrive at Grantebridge when Wigmund and Soma go back and forth with negotiations until Wigmund refuses to give up the town. So they force their way in and take it back, with Wigmund cowardly running away. They celebrate, and the next day Soma shows Eivor a tunnel she created that was a secret project of hers. However, on the day of the attack, the Saxons knew about the tunnel and used it to infiltrate the town and liberate it. The only people who knew were the 3 advisors in her circle, to which Eivor suspects a betrayal. When Soma confirms the suspicion but isn't sure who of the 3, and requests Eivor to help them out and obtain information from them. Eivor meets with Galen and speaks with him. Eivor asks his thoughts on the other 2. Galen gasses Leif, but not so much of Björna for how Soma found her, but will still fight alongside her. He asks how he joined Soma's clan, to which he responds he had a vision, but he wanted more. So he ate only henbane, mushrooms and sacred plants for years, but he was all over the place. Until one day, Soma found him and took him in. They pillaged the village in front of them to grab the attention of Wigmund. Eivor meets with Björna and speaks with her. Björna gasses the other 2 and says she was in England before everyone else came over and went down a bad path, but Soma found her and she changed her life around. She continues on to mention the love she has for Soma. They storm the fortress and eradicate the guards to further grab the attention of Wigmund. Eivor meets with Leif and speaks with him. He goes on to say he was always part of Soma's clan, but was under Guthrum's leadership at the time, until he left for Wessex and she became the new leader, which he would have liked instead. However, he wouldn't let Björna or Galen's opinions hold weight because their heads aren't screwed on, to say the least. He also goes on to talk about the work of his shipbuilding and what goes into it, talking about yellow paint that someone allegedly stole recently. They head on to sneak into the church and assassinate the priest to finally attract the attention of Wigmund. Eivor returns to Grantebridge to find one of Wigmund's captains captured. They begin interrogating him and he inevitably gives up Wigmund's location, a monastery. Galen assassinates the captain. Eivor speaks to Soma and tells him everything he knows about the three advisors before asking him who he thinks it is, but it's too early to call just yet. Eivor asks around the town for any useful info on the three, but doesn't get far until he heads into the swamps and finds a shipwreck with yellow paint and a note referencing what Galen said about a Volva. Eivor presents his findings to Soma and accuses Galen. Learning this information, he is slain by her. They head to the monastery and Eivor assassinates Wigmund. Eivor returns to Soma and she gives him the bracelet to signal a friendship and alliance. Eivor also recruits Björna to the Raven clan. Eivor gives a speech back in Ravensthorpe until Dag butts in and doesn't approve of Eivor speaking like him and Sigurd are equals and wonders if Sigurd will do the same with Eivor, to which Eivor responds saying yes. Eivor and Dag go back and forth before they're interrupted by an attack on their settlement. Eivor and the Raven clan eradicate the invaders when they manage to find a straggler and learn the intruders came from East Anglia in search of silver, but the person who ordered the attack is unknown. Hytham requests Eivor to track down and eliminate members of the order. Eivor heads to East Anglia and confronts Finnir on why there's no king on the throne. He explains in order to be king, they need to be married, and the man currently trying to attain the title isn't married yet. Eivor learns the attackers were part of the Rued clan, and the man in question turns out to be Oswald. Eivor meets him, and before they go for a ride, he reveals he's planning to marry Voldus, a cousin of Halfdan's. But her brothers don't approve of him, which is causing the delay. They reach a village that contains Rued's men, and Eivor eradicates the area, getting vengeance on the attack on their settlement. Oswald invites Eivor to dinner to provide some perspective. Eivor arrives and meets the brothers. They begin taunting each other until it turns into a brawl. Eivor barely survives against the duo before the fight is broken up. The brothers continue insulting him, calling him useless and unworthy. Eivor begins the journey of toughening up Oswald by putting him in a fighting match with Finnir and teaching him the ways of the battle rap. Then they meet elsewhere and Eivor duels Oswald where he barely holds on but manages to survive. They head to Serpent's Landing and pillage more of the area relating to the Rued clan. Eivor meets Oswald back home in Norwich and witnesses Oswald and Broder going back and forth until the conversation is interrupted by another member of the Rued clan sniffing around the base. Eivor finds the other scout, ties him up and brings him to Oswald. Oswald interrogates him but is met with a spit in the face. He continues pressing him when he's met with more insults. Eivor takes over and gets him talking. He then addresses Voldus directly with Rued's name in the same sentence. It is then revealed that Rued used to be Voldus' husband, but they've been apart for quite a while and wants nothing to do with him now. Oswald then courageously talks about speaking with Rued and attempting to make peace, but the others have no faith he'll be taken serious. Eivor meets with the others and they strategize a plan to storm the fortress. Eivor sneaks his way in and eradicates the fortress of Rued's men before lighting the brazier. They finally meet Rued and he offers a duel for the future of East Anglia. Oswald agrees and they fight. Oswald shows heart and courage, but they both fall off the edge and into the ocean. Eivor speaks with Finnir and they plan an attack on Rued's fortress, but they need assistance. So they head to Thetford and enlist the help of the Reeve. He refuses at first, but Eivor offers to help his men and he starts to budge a little and pledges to help if he takes back one of the churches that was taken from him. Eivor heads to the church and eradicates the area of Rued's men, then blows the horn to signal the Reeve. Eivor speaks with the Reeve who holds his word to help them in their attack on Rued's fortress. The day comes for the attack and they push while they push through multiple barrages of fire arrows. They launch the ship filled with oil jars into the base to breach their way in. Eivor forces his way through and discovers Oswald to still be alive but is a hostage to Rued. Eivor fights Rued and defeats him. Eivor speaks to Oswald and he seems excited to finally get married. The event is underway with lots of drinking taking place post-celebration, and Fenrir goes a bit overboard and causes panic within the attendees. He collapses on the roof when Eivor picks him up and brings him to safety. A ceremony is held to finally crown Oswald the new king of East Anglia and gives Eivor the bracelet to signal friendship and an alliance. Eivor also recruits Fenrir to the Raven clan. Valka arrives at the settlement to Eivor greeting her and builds her hut. He collects the plants she needs to brew the elixir. Eivor drinks it and is transported to Asgard, living through the memory of Harvi, or Odin, the High One as they call him. He is foretold a prophecy of Ragnarok coming with a lot of bloodshed and brotherly betrayals. He is also foretold his death to Fenrir the Wolf. Harvey heads to the Great Hall of Valhalla as they call it, and learns Asgard is being invaded by Jotunheim forces. Harvey brings Thor with him to fight alongside, and they push through the warriors of Jotunheim to close the gate to Jotunheim. Harvey is left confused as Loki was meant to be guarding the gate to Jotunheim and speaks to him. He explains the portal opened with soldiers pouring through and sent warning straight away. Harvey is introduced to the builder and believes his presence belongs here because Jotunheim wouldn't accept it. Harvey doesn't exactly buy what he's saying, but he claims to be useful, so Harvey uses that to his advantage and requests him to fix the portal. However, the builder responds saying the portal isn't the only way the Jotnar can enter and offers a solution, but he needs the sacred water from their well to demonstrate his solution. Harvey heads to the well of Erdur, unseals it and collects the water. He runs into Fenrir the Wolf, who can shapeshift into a puppy, and attempts to put it down due to his fates, but Tyr quickly stops him. He requests to have the wolf caged until further notice. He returns to the builder and gives him the water before demonstrating his solution. It's a powerful shield that immediately eliminates any Jotunheim warriors who pass through it. But there's a problem. It's unstable, which leaves Harvey to survive and fend for himself while the builder fixes it. He fixes it and Harvey returns to him. It's revealed that the builder came here with intent. He says he can build a shield tower so tall it would shield all of Asgard, but under the condition he can have Freya as his queen and wife. The builder stands on business and says no Freya, no building. Harvey fires back saying tread lightly, you have no friends here. Harvey returns to the gods and sees Fenrir in the cage before heading to Freya to consult her on the builder's demands. Freya is rightfully annoyed by this, meanwhile Tyr isn't completely opposed to the idea. Until Loki comes up with the idea to give the builder a deadline of 9 days to finish the construction of the shield, which he would doubtfully finish in time, which leaves Freya to be free and they will finish his work. Thor and Freya aren't too keen on the idea, neither is Harvey, but they've got to do something. All of a sudden, the wolf escapes the cage and Harvey chases it to a large flowery area where they battle. Harvey defeats him, and before he confirms the kill, Loki comes in and objects, revealing the wolf to be his son. Thor and Tyr show up when Harvey requests Tyr to jail the wolf and bind it, making sure it never leaves Asgard. Harvey pays a visit to Ivaldi and notices him talking to the builder. He asks Ivaldi about it, but he won't give away info for free and requests a hidden fact only Harvey knows. Harvey tells him a hidden fact, and Ivaldi tells him the builder was inquiring about how the magic affects one's spirit of an Aesir and Vanir alike, until Ivaldi told him to piss off. Harvey requests Ivaldi to forge a chain strong enough to bind Fenrir. Ivaldi vows to forge a strong chain using all his knowledge and skill, but to forge said chain, he'll need some ingredients: a bear's tendon, fish's breath, a cat's footstep, and the root of a mountain. Harvey collects the ingredients and returns to Ivaldi, who has no estimation on the completion of the chain. He also mentions he was told by a relative that the husband of their sister drank a mead brewed in Jotunheim and that a spirit was turned into a goat. Freya interrupts the conversation to inform Harvey of the tower nearly being done and expresses concern of potentially having to marry the builder. However, Harvey vows to make sure that doesn't happen. Harvey goes to investigate the tower when the builder says he has one rune to inscribe but won't do it until he is married. Harvey questions how he got it done so quickly, and he seemingly admits to having outside help. Thor and Tyr show up with Freya in between them. Thor winks at Harvey, which signals it's not actually Freya, and it's Loki shapeshifted as Freya. The builder kisses Loki, in which it seems like Loki didn't expect it to go that far, and blows his cover. The builder expresses frustration and demands the real Freya. She shows up, but they yap for so long the builder gets frustrated and says no Freya, no shield. But then, Loki reveals he knows where the builder stores the paint. While they go searching for it, Harvey talks to Loki and he learns Loki knew of the builder previously, that he rescued his son from Jotunheim and agreed to bring him to Asgard to find work. Harvey demands him to make things right. Harvey finds the box of paint and brings it to the builder. Harvey says he'll finish the inscription while the builder watches. Once Harvey finishes the inscription and the shield is active, the builder shapeshifts into a brute warrior from Jotunheim and reveals he didn't build the tower to keep the enemies out, but rather keep Harvey in. Harvey defeats the builder and sends him to Helheim. Harvey looks at Loki as he answers Freya's question when Freya calls him dishonorable. Loki fires back, basically calling her the 4-letter S word. Then Tyr pipes up and says you're a father to a damn wolf cub. Loki fires back again, saying I won't hear from someone who refuses to lay down the law, then pipes up at Thor and says he's nothing without his hammer. Loki eventually walks away. Freya questions Harvey on what to do since Ragnarok is coming. Harvey proposes a solution in Jotunheim to do with their mead. Eivor wakes up from the dream and tells Valka everything he saw. She is blown away by what Eivor tells her and says she needs time to think. Eivor heads for Shire, where Sigurd is trying to install Giedrich as Elderman in exchange for an oath. He arrives in the town of Buckingham where he's not so welcome. He finds no sign of Sigurd until he talks to a Saxon woman, where she reveals Sigurd is with Basim and pays her to reveal he's in one of the fish houses up the river. Eivor locates it and finds the pair. He isn't too pleased to find Basim tagging along when the MO is assassination, and Sigurd has been trying to do opposite of that. Eivor mentions Lady Edwin to form an alliance with her. Sigurd goes on to explain her husband was the alderman of the Shire until he was slain by Guthrum's army, and she is now fighting his fight with the promise of aid from King Alfred of Wessex. She vows revenge on the Danes who stole her husband's livelihood, so if she can attain King Alfred's full support, they lose the Shire to Wessex. Giedrich is a prisoner to Edwin now, however, which puts a roadblock in Sigurd's plan. Sigurd plans to just rock up to Edwin and demand Giedrich to be released, which he thought was somehow going to work.
Lady, there's no need for slaughter. We all want peace for Shire. Can we find some agreement?
You heathenish fork-tongued Dane. Foul-smelling heap, I shit on you all.
Lady, choose your next words with care, for you see before you the future master of all England, Sigurd of the hungry Raven clan. Lay down your arms, free my friend here, and kiss my lordly feet. You will not get a second chance.
Sigurd, are you cracked?
And you can kiss my rosy red ass, wayface. I've done with this offal. I leave them to you. Flay them alive and tan their flesh for saddles.
Eivor and Sigurd eradicate the Longhouse of Edwin's men and secure it. They talk to Giedrich, who mentioned the other Thanes Edwin have prisoner who will slay them if they don't act now. Basim mentions Fulke to set a meeting with her, but they won't know more until they free the Thanes. They head to the Leah Villa garrison and take out the guards, while Eivor frees the prisoners and escorts them to safety. They speak to Thane Holt and mention Fulke. Holt calls her a mad woman, but Sigurd doesn't care and still wants to meet her. Holt tells them Lady Edwin had her imprisoned once she claimed to have seen or spoken to God himself. Eivor meets with Sigurd and Basim, who learn Fulke is held at St. Albany's monastery. Eivor asks for an explanation on the importance behind this Fulke woman. Sigurd is very vague with his reasoning, which causes a back and forth between the pair until Eivor just accepts it. They head inside the monastery and locate Fulke. They run into a Saxon man who's guarding Fulke's door and refuses to open the door. Eivor uses his charisma on the guard, who gives him the key, and he frees Fulke. Sigurd and Basim begin questioning her on a Roman artifact they believe she is in possession of, but she responds deflecting from the question. Until they follow her and she begins explaining the objects she's collected over time and where she's collected them from. They get to the stables and it's revealed the alliance with Giedrich was a ploy, and Sigurd all of a sudden believes he's a descendant from the gods above. The real reason they were interested in Fulke is because she possesses a stone that's been disrespected, which she calls the Saga Stone, that contains runes inscribed upon it, which Sigurd is interested in reading. She offers to take them to see it, in which they accept. But when they get there, they find the person guarding the stone slain and the stone gone. Sigurd is frustrated by the situation and places blame on Eivor for slowing them down. Eivor reminds Sigurd of the true nature of their visit here to form an alliance and fight against Edwin, but Sigurd's victory is knowing his true self and destiny instead, completely going off course. Before Sigurd can continue, they're paid a visit by Edwin and her men. Sigurd gets so in his head and forgets why they're actually there in the first place and agrees to assassinate Geidrich in exchange for the stone and leaving Xenofordshire. Sigurd's actions drive Eivor mad to the point he sticks to the original plan and throws his axe at one of Edwin's men before eradicating the area of the rest of her men. Sigurd and Basim press Eivor on causing bloodshed when they were so close to being in possession of the stone, but Eivor again reminds them of why they're here in the first place. Sigurd basically says he doesn't care and to listen to him. Basim backs up Sigurd when Eivor socks him in the face. Eivor and Sigurd go back and forth again until he deals a low blow and says his father knew not to always trust Eivor. After eradicating King Alfred's men, Eivor and Fulke talk when Fulke questions what Sigurd's been saying and asks if it's true. Eivor has no idea what's going on and it's all babbled to him. Eivor meets with Geidrich and Geidrich says the men are ready to attack the fortress, but her defenses stand in the way of actually doing anything. Eivor vows to take care of said defenses. He heads to the fortress and sneaks in, disabling the defenses and destroying the oil cauldrons. Eivor returns and Sigurd starts going on about visions and prophecies he's had from the gods and mentions Tyr. He tells Geidrich he's ready to attack and they breach the fortress and force their way in. He comes face to face with Lady Edwin and defeats her. Eivor decides to banish her from Mercia. Geidrich keeps to his word about forming the alliance but doesn't give him a bracelet. Eivor regroups with the trio and discovers the Saga Stone, an ancient Isu relic. Eivor has a vision with Odin where he recognizes a doorway he's passed through with Sigurd many times, which confuses Eivor. Sigurd mentions the Tree of Life and correlates it to what Basim's been saying. Sigurd tells Eivor he's so much more than what he appears to be, until Eivor fires back saying don't feed into this dark magic, but Sigurd believes it all to be true. Their conversation is cut short when Geidrich runs in, informing the boys of King Alfred's arrival, but Geidrich's men are all spent and they have no chance against King Alfred, until Sigurd comes up with the solution to call a parley with King Alfred. Sigurd and King Alfred negotiate and trade their best men. Alfred calls up his man to trade, and Basim offers to trade himself until Fulke comes in and says to take Sigurd instead, because all the yapping he's been doing about him claiming to be a descendant of a god has now made him worth more than 20 men. She sings like a bird to Alfred about everything Sigurd has said, to which they rightfully don't take too kindly. Sigurd agrees to go with King Alfred and Fulke. Eivor returns home to a letter from Fulke saying that Sigurd is in good hands, but reveals herself to be a member of the Order under the alias The Instrument. Eivor heads to a small town called London. He meets a man named Stowe who takes him to the governor of the town, Trigger, but when they arrive, they find him decapitated. Eivor also meets Urke, Trigger's right-hand man. Eivor investigates the crime scene and finds a letter on his body mentioning correlation to the Order and conclude the murderers wanted them to see it, and there's 3 involved in the murder. Eivor finds some barber tools which he believes responsible for the decapitation and finds a guard hanging by a noose holding a letter. Eivor comes to a conclusion on what went down.
Trigger was shot where he sat, probably as he read the letter. One of his guards grabbed the seal and tried to escape. He didn't do it. The second killer found him first. He met his end at the noose, lifted by the bigger man. A third attacker took his eyes, then came for Trigger's head. Symbolic, maybe. Headless leader, eyeless guards. The killers were without fear. This killer was a message. Their footprints leave together. 3 sets, heading back to the courtyard. The letter mentions 3 heretics, named only by monikers. The Leech, the Arrow, the Compass. Signed by someone calling himself a poor fellow soldier of Christ.
They discuss the names from the Order but can't think of a confirmed link to anyone, until Eivor shows a symbol which links to a temple nearby, the Mithraic Temple. Eivor explores the temple and finds some finely crafted surgeon tools like back of the crime scene, and a letter arranging payment to a blacksmith. He also finds a letter from the Compass telling the Arrow to recruit more archers, and finally, he finds a final letter with a conversation between the Leech and the Compass. The Leech wants to use Trigger as they believe he's a great aid for their work, but the Compass wants him dead for interfering with their work, and the Compass calls the shots. Eivor returns and mentions the Order. The pair are confused, but with no time to explain, he says his point of being here is to assassinate them. Eivor meets Urke at the docks, and Eivor discovers a bunch of dead bodies linking back to the compass. All of a sudden, they're met by a woman named Gyda, who claims her daughter works for a blacksmith, being an errand girl, but she hasn't been seen in a couple days. She further mentions someone lingering under the London Bridge after sundown. Learning this information, Eivor waits till sundown at the location and sees the person. He tails him to a fortress. He fights through some enemies, making him feel unwelcome before finding the blacksmith's hut. Eivor comes up with the cover story about being a friend of the person running the errand. The blacksmith mentions the girl from earlier and says she got sick, so she sent her to Sister Frideswith, who was revealed to be the leech from the Order. Eivor assassinates the blacksmith. Eivor meets Stow in the markets. Stow goes on to explain the Arrow's recruitment process. Allegedly, a man gives you a coin, and this coin grants you access to a contest run by the Arrow's men. If you win, you earn a place by the Arrow's side. But first, you have to meet a man named Hussar and recite this phrase to get in.
May the Father of Understanding guide us.
And may the Mother of Wisdom give us strength.
The Arrow reveals himself to be Avgos's spear hand and is shortly assassinated by Eivor soon after. Eivor breaks the news to Stow, who refuses to believe such information. Eivor heads to the church that houses the leech and assassinates her. Eivor breaks the news to Urke, who also refuses to believe such information. Eivor meets Stow and Urke, who are met with an angry mob outside in response to Avgos's murder. They discuss the compass and formulate a plan to take him out. During the discussion, the angry mob sets fire to the church they're in, which causes Eivor to escape. He rescues Stow and Urke from the front, who are blocked by the door. Stow and Urke come up with the plan, and Eivor chooses to go with Stow and use the Springalds. Eivor battles the compass, who is revealed to be Viceland, and assassinates him. Eivor breaks the news to the pair and they are pleased to hear it. Eivor is then met with a bracelet signaling friendship and an alliance. Eivor breaks the news to Hytham, who is pleased to hear it, but also mentions Jorvik is going through the same thing London did. Eivor heads to Shropshire and learns Ceolbert is there, but the Shire is in a bit of a pickle with King Rodri. Ceolbert aims to negotiate peace with the Britons, but some doubt is expressed. Eivor meets with Ceolbert, who seems to be training with Ivar, but ends with Ceolbert dropped. Eivor learns King Rodri aims for peace as well, due to Ivar capturing his brother. Ivar reveals he has a past with King Rodri, when Eivor advises him to stay away so things don't escalate. But Ceolbert chimes in and requests both their presence. They head to the church and walk into talks between Rodri's right-hand man and Bishop Diolav, explaining that offers of peace are off the table until King Rodri's brother is returned. Ivar intervenes on the conversation before he and King Rodri go back and forth. Ivar refuses to give his brother back unless Rodri's head is on a pike. The bishop speaks to Eivor and gives him some silver to give to someone in exchange for peace. Eivor speaks with Rodri's right-hand man and says he will follow what he says, so Eivor decides to give the silver to him in exchange for pursuing Rodri to initiate peace. Eivor breaks the news to the bishop and the conversation is interrupted by Ivar getting pissed off at King Rodri's presence and wants to fight him. Rodri laughs in his face because his fate is dying to a dragon, until Ivar takes it up a notch and just straight up murders his brother, which fuels an all-out war. They secure the church and they're disappointed with Ivar's actions. They wipe out Britain's soldiers and return to the bishop. He presses Ivar on his aggressiveness ruining a potential deal, but he gives no fucks. They strategize a plan to destroy Rodri's supplies to force him back into talks of peace. Eivor meets with Ivar and Ceolbert and they decide to burn the cottage that houses Rodri's right-hand man. They murder enough of his men to the point he shows up with his own men before Eivor assassinates him. They regroup and the bishop meets with the boys and informs them he sent word to Rodri in hopes he'll be open to peace. They tell Ivar to lay low, to which he doesn't take too kindly to such a request. Ceolbert comes up with the idea to hunt a boar and tell tales of war with Ivar while roasting the boar over the campfire to please him. King Rodri's wife arrives when the bishop expresses concern for Ceolbert's absence. The wife expresses a similar desire for peace and they come to an agreement. Allow them time to collect their things and leave in exchange for Eivor and co to stop the hostility as of this moment. Eivor searches around the camp for Ceolbert, but he's gone. He speaks to the guards outside Ceolbert's tent, but only the brother knows of his last known location. However, he's drunk, so Eivor takes him for a dip to wake him up and he reveals Ceolbert is in a cave nearby. Eivor heads inside the cave and searches for Ceolbert. He finds him, but he's badly injured. Eivor retrieves the sword and discovers a Briton crest on it. He picks him up and carries him back to camp. Eivor gives Ivar the dagger he found and places blame on Rodri, confirming Ivar's statement to Rodri being a liar. Ivar vows to murder Rodri with the dagger that's slain Ceolbert. They head to the castle that houses King Rodri and breach the main gate with an oil cart. They force their way in and come face to face with King Rodri.
Ivar the Boneless, you make a pitiful dragon. Bastard kicked me in the liver. I need some fresh air.
Ivar has something planned, which is why he didn't slay him. They take Rodri to the top of the mountain, where he gives Rodri the infamous Blood Eagle and ties him up on display. But Ivar becomes bloodthirsty and wants more. He challenges Eivor to a duel, to which Eivor initially refuses, but to add fuel to the fire, Ivar comes clean and admits he was the one who slain Ceolbert, which angers Eivor, who now wants nothing more than to see Ivar slain. Once Ivar is slain by Eivor, he chooses to send him to Valhalla. He meets with the bishop and Obba and breaks the news. Obba understandably doesn't take it too well, but accepts it. Now peace is possible. The bishop is to be made alderman of Shropshire and confirms a friendship and alliance with the Raven clan. Eivor heads to a territory called Kent. Basim is there and he claims to have found Fulke and requests the help of Eivor. He meets with Basim, who tells him Fulke is here somewhere and Sigurd was with her, but there's no guarantee with each passing day. He further mentions an Abbot Kinnebert and introduces him to Eivor. Eivor questions him on Fulke's location and tells him she's a pleasant woman, but of course, to get more information, he will need to do something for him. The alderman of Kent passed away and King Alfred has appointed a new alderman, but hasn't announced anything yet. Kinnebert wants to know the new name now. The king's emissary knows who it is and sent a letter of congratulations to them. He wants Eivor to intercept him and break the news back to Kinnebert to discuss how he may become the new alderman instead. Eivor heads to where the king's emissary is and assassinates him, revealing the new alderman to be Thane Tedmund. Learning this information, he returns to Kinnebert and breaks the news. Kinnebert is upset by this information due to Tedmund basically never leaving the fortress, so he won't get a chance to talk to him. Eivor comes up with the idea to storm the fortress and kidnap Tedmund and save him from the enemies, then Tedmund would owe him his life and gratitude, therefore giving him influence and vouching for Kinnebert to be the new alderman instead. They storm the fortress where Tedmund is and kidnap him. They bring him to Kinnebert, who requests him to be released on behalf of King Alfred. Just before the negotiations begin, Kinnebert notices something's up with the man they kidnapped. The kidnapped man then reveals himself to be Shergar. Tedmund allegedly pays him to act as his stunt double. Shergar mentions a raiding camp nearby full of Danes and he ordered soldiers to capture them, acting as Tedmund. If they act now, they can still save them and use the Danes to storm the fortress and distract the guards. They head to the camp and Shergar uses his power to get the soldiers to leave the camp and the Danes. Eivor frees the Danes and ends the night around a campfire with Basim. Basim gets deep with Eivor and says he has no family, further revealing he had a son until he was unfortunately taken by someone he called a friend. The next day, they attack the fortress and force their way in, with Eivor battling Tedmund and taking him hostage. They bring him to Kinnebert and they negotiate 20 chests of silver for Tedmund's life. Before they can come to an agreement, Tedmund seems to be poisoned and has a coughing fit before sadly passing away. Kinnebert isn't happy about this, complaining that Alfred will choose another alderman and he'll have to redo the whole process over again. He tells the boys to come back the next day, but when he meets Basim, he notices the abbot's monks and servants are nowhere to be seen and is suspicious. They enter the abbot's chambers and find Fulke inside and Kinnebert slain. Eivor demands to know where Sigurd is, but is told she's not done with him yet, so he'll never find him. Eivor and Basim head to the cathedral to find Fulke, but upon trying to find her, Eivor stumbles upon something, Sigurd's right arm. Eivor returns home and is pressed by Dag on the fact that Sigurd isn't with him. Eivor heads to sleep and wakes up to Dag yelling out to him. Eivor, investigating the commotion, walks outside to an angry Dag, accusing him of being lazy and not caring about Sigurd one bit. He continues on challenging him for the leadership of the Raven clan, where Dag is put down and sent to Valhalla. Eivor vows to the Raven clan to find Sigurd by any means possible. Eivor heads to Sussex and meets with Basim along with Guthrum. Eivor notices he's short on men until he learns his allies are still on their way, but is impatient and wants to attack now to save Sigurd. However, they can't attack now anyway, as Basim informs Eivor of spies that work for Fulke in the area, which Eivor vows to take care of. Eivor returns to Guthrum and Basim, breaking the news until their camp is invaded by Porchester forces. They push them back until Fulke's champion sounds the horn and tells his soldiers to retreat. Eivor battles him and defeats him, but spares him to send a message. Returning to the camp, Guthrum announces his departure from the attack and heads west. Eivor isn't too happy to learn this and they go back and forth until Guthrum gives him some valuable advice and says to attack with strategy, not with emotion. Eivor rallies his allies and makes way for Fulke's fortress. They have a back and forth at the entrance until Eivor breaches the castle and forces his way in. He searches for Sigurd, but during his search he finds Fulke on the bridge heading to the church. Eivor gets inside the church and finds Sigurd weak due to loss of blood, leaning against the altar at the front. Eivor makes a run for it, but Fulke gets away. He chases after Fulke and battles her. She starts talking about Sigurd as an Isu during the battle before Eivor finally fells her. Eivor returns home to Sigurd, accusing him of purposely taking his time to find him to enjoy his time on the throne, when Eivor says that's far from the truth. Sigurd immediately changes subject and starts going crazy, calling himself a god. He takes a second and blames his tiredness before leaving the longhouse. Eivor finds Sigurd and speaks with him, where he learns of Dag's death and calls him a fool before continuing to talk about how above he is, but in a more chill and mannered tone. Eivor attempts to ground him, but Sigurd is having none of it and asks to be alone. Eivor heads to another small town called Jorvik. When he gets there, he asks around the docks for the whereabouts of old friends Hjor and Lefina. No one really has clear information until he speaks to one of the kids, who tells him to speak to the dockmaster Gregory. Eivor speaks to the dockmaster, who tells him where they reside. Eivor investigates the manor and finds the place to be ransacked with a dead body inside that doesn't belong to either of the pair. Eivor investigates the mess and finds the scattered scrolls, some blood on a railing that led to a struggle outside, a pile of blood with no body, and finds another dead body who he thinks is one of the thieves. He continues up the path until he runs into Lefina, but she has trust issues and is suspicious of Eivor's arrival, going as far as to question his alliance with the Order, which he quickly shoots down. She apologizes for being so tense and gives him a scroll that the thieves were after, with the name on it reading, "Poor fellow soldier of Christ." They head to the royal hall, where Eivor reunites with Hjor and informs Hjor of 3 new Order targets terrorizing the city of Jorvik. Hjor gives Eivor a letter that mentions 3 names on it: the Needle, the Firebrand, and the Vault. But before they can do anything about these names from the Order, Eivor requests to meet the king to inform him of the situation. But when he meets him, they don't get off on the best foot. But Eivor, handling the antagonizing king, explains the situation with the Order. He asks for info on the Red Hand, to which the king provides, and further explains to handle the situation quietly to avoid alarming the public of the danger. Eivor and Lefina talk when Eivor notices the stack of scrolls next to them, and learns that Christian texts which the Red Hand seem to be after, and they're also concerned they'll go after the archives next. Eivor questions why they might be after the Christian texts, but no one knows. He continues asking questions and learns the archives house the largest collection of texts in the city, also learning that the dockmaster has been using Jorvik's money shortage to increase taxes like he was apparently told to by higher ups. Eivor, learning this information, makes his way to the archives and investigates. Upon investigating, he finds an expensive list of items including wreaths, timber, food, and wine to prepare for the upcoming Yuletide feast. A pile of official scrolls, stamped with a seal, and notices quite a few barrels of wine. As he's about to read a letter on the table in front of him, Odin makes an appearance with Ingeborg when Eivor explains the Christian text situation. Odin mentions Abbess Ingeborg is offering to bring the text somewhere safe before introducing the 2 of them. Eivor begins questioning her because an abbess isn't exactly suitable against a gang of ruthless bandits, but she explains that it's her duty to protect the role of Christianity. Eivor understands her stance, but unless the Red Hand is taken down, they'll stop at nothing to obtain said texts. He further goes on to say, with the Red Hand seeming to know the location of the texts, he suspects someone is guarding them. The pair go quiet until Ingeborg reveals she suspects foul play at the rectory, hearing whispers along with mentioning suspicious activity from the bishop. Learning this information, Eivor heads to the rectory and speaks to one of the priests, who tells him he's hiding from the Red Hand and waiting for the bishop. Eivor asks about the other priest and learns he's next door. He pays him a visit and is told the same thing. Eivor learns the bishop is in his quarters and requests to be taken there. They arrive and the priest points out an odd burning smell. Eivor investigates and finds the bishop dead with a charred letter underneath him. The letter reads a confession from the bishop destroying the texts against his own will, further mentioning the minster and the abbess. Eivor gets inside the minster and finds a bonfire going down on the ground floor burning the texts, when Eivor comes to learn that Abbess Ingeborg is a member of the order under the name the Firebrand. Eivor identifies her and assassinates her, sending her to Helheim. Before she dies though, she leaves Eivor a cryptic message. One of the four is us. Eivor returns to Lefina and breaks the news. She is surprised by the news but accepts it. Eivor mentions the cryptic message from her and she wonders if they're missing something. But then, Faravid walks in with the king, crashing out about a gang called the Picts in the area. Lefina tells Eivor to investigate the harbour and see what he can find. Eivor searches the trade depot and finds seized exotic wares that seems to match what the Red Hand are looking for. He also finds a written letter from the dockmaster ordering someone to take the coin merchants earn and deliver it back to him, specifically mentioning what their stalls look like. Eivor finds one of the merchants that match the description and speaks to her. He mentions wanting to give her silver, but she freaks out and sends him off. While finding the next stall, he overhears guards talking about the needle requesting more protection after an earlier incident at the depot. Eivor takes that as an opportunity to come back and tail them to the needle. Eivor finds another merchant and speaks to him, expressing his interest in spending silver. The merchant refers to the dockmaster before getting suspicious and refusing to do business, until a kid overhears Eivor talking about silver and seems to be affiliated with the needle and gives him a location. Eivor heads to the alleged hideout and finds an entrance to the sewers. He explores the sewers and finds a room with a locked door. He obtains the key for it and unlocks it. Heading inside, he finds Grigori, who tells him to leave, but Eivor presses him. He continues on asking if he is the needle. Grigori basically confirms it but doesn't give a definitive yes. Eivor fights off Grigori's men and escapes the sewers. When he gets out, he finds Grigori confronting one of the merchants Eivor talked to and murders him. Eivor gets retaliation and assassinates him. Eivor returns to Lefina and breaks the news. Before Eivor can reveal the identity, Hjor comes in, also breaking the news of the assassination, with Eivor explaining what the dockmaster did. Eivor reveals the council stamp he retrieved from Grigori, and they realize the cryptic message from earlier refers to the four members of council: King Rhysei, Aravid, Orden, and Hjor. The pair investigate the archives once again, and Eivor finds the list of items for the feast from earlier, mostly crossed off, and questions Orden's source of silver. They notice the desk Eivor reads the letter on has been moved. They move it back and find wine that used to be there before it was moved. Eivor mentions the room smelled of almonds, theorizing the wine to be poisoned. They link the wine back to possibly being used for the Yuletide feast. They attend the events and Eivor begins questioning the council members. They all seem innocent until he questions Orden and he refuses to have a drop of wine and says it's for the people of Jorvik. Gathering the information, Eivor heads back to Lefina and accuses Orden of being in the vault. Orden makes a speech and introduces the four lords of Jorvik as guests. The guests drink the wine, who then choke and die shortly after. Eivor chases down Orden and assassinates him. They regroup at the royal hall and explain to King Rhysei how the three members link to the order. Rhysei expresses gratitude to Eivor for saving them from the looming threat and rewards him by naming him as an honorary High Reeve of Jorvik. Eivor accepts with honor. Before the conversation concludes, Eivor mentions a lot of silver in the sewers that the dockmaster was collecting and chooses to give it back to the merchants who were robbed of their wares. Before Eivor leaves, Lefina gives Eivor the bracelet that signals friendship and an alliance. Eivor returns to Hytham, who praises him for his efforts in Jorvik before telling Eivor about a letter that came from him from a poor fellow soldier of Christ. who requests his presence in Winchester, visiting the church and looking for a man and saying the following phrase:
When pride cometh, then cometh shame, but with the lowly cometh wisdom.
The priest isn't confident yet that Eivor's up for the task. Eivor explores the library, reading certain passages from books to find answers to the test he's given, and once he gathers the answers and talks to the priest again, who is impressed, he leads Eivor upstairs into the room of King Alfred himself. He goes on to say Eivor was invited to speak on equal terms, but Eivor presses King Alfred on the fact that he gifted Sigurd to Fulke. Alfred replies saying Fulke was an enemy to Wessex, but learns of her looming threat to be taken care of. Eivor makes sure he knows it was him who took care of business. Alfred is impressed when Eivor questions how much he knows of the order. Alfred responds by beating around the bush. King Alfred shows Eivor a letter from the poor fellow soldier of Christ warning Alfred of a plot against his life, mentioning 3 names: the gallows, the quill, and the Sikhs. However, King Alfred corrects the number, making it 2 now, with the death of the bishop who was revealed to be the Sikhs. Eivor threatens to have the order kill him, but he fires back saying that won't do anything. Alfred goes on to say his reeve, Goodwin, wasn't where he was supposed to be this morning, and says he was following the clues in the letter before his disappearance. Eivor goes to investigate Goodwin's house and finds a half-burned letter from the gallows threatening to take him hostage if he doesn't stop snooping. He also finds a stool toppled over along with broken bowls and food everywhere, signaling he was taken by force. Eivor heads to the fortress that has Goodwin hostage and finds him before freeing him. Goodwin mentions he has research papers on who the order members could possibly be. Eivor finds the research and learns it seems like Harold was taken from his home, and 4 others came forward with information on the gallows' identity, but all 4 met a horrible fate. 2 were hung publicly on petty charges, 1 was found dead allegedly after a drunken brawl, and 1 ran away. Goodwin suspects the gallows to be another reeve, but has no proof. Eivor talks to Goodwin and suspects Reeve Selwyn of being the gallows. He makes sense of the suspicion and tells Eivor to end him. So he does. Eivor returns to Goodwin, who is with Alfred, and he isn't too happy about causing public scrutiny taking care of the gallows. But Eivor responds saying he only did what was asked. Alfred mentions the quill when Goodwin also mentions they've been calling the children of Winchester to arms. After the conversation, Eivor spots a child hiding in plain sight, and they talk about the assassination of the gallows. The child asks if Eivor found her mother's good luck charm when it was taken from her, but sadly he didn't and gives her a silver instead. Eivor takes this opportunity to tail the girl and ends up in an area full of children. He finds 1 pair of children up to mischief, setting stuff on fire until they're caught by guards when they run away. Eivor finds the pair again and speaks to them. Shortly after, a pair of bandits show up and demand their stuff back, but Eivor defends the children and fights them off. Eivor speaks to the children again and learns the quill resides in the sewers and is given a key to the sewers. Eivor heads inside the sewers and explores, when he comes across a table full of apples before being called out by the child from earlier, who's with the quill and promptly assassinates her. Eivor returns to Goodwin, but he already knows of the assassination before Eivor can say anything. Eivor questions Goodwin on if the Sikhs is really dead, and he responds saying the bishop died, and if he was the Sikhs, then he is dead. Eivor doesn't believe such a thing until Goodwin suggests for Eivor to attend the funeral and investigate. Eivor attends the funeral and speaks to his sister. Eivor says he knows her brother still lives, and she responds in disbelief to such a claim, and then becomes stern all of a sudden, saying he is dead regardless of what you say. Eivor investigates the dead body and notices only the face was burned. Eivor returns to the sister and demands to know where the Sikhs is, when she responds saying he'll appear at the Whitsun and overthrow King Alfred to become the new king. Eivor finds the Sikhs and assassinates him. He brings the body to Alfred, who expresses gratitude. Harriet comes in after Alfred and Goodwin leave and questions why he did it. Instead of answering, he shows her a key and she reveals it to unlock the ruins beneath the bishop's house. Eivor finds the door and makes his way inside the ruins. Investigating, he finds an unsealed letter from the instrument claiming the mark to be King Alfred. He also finds another note with some religious passage on it, concluding the sister lied to him. Eivor returns to King Alfred, who attempts to convert him to Christianity but refuses and threatens his crown instead. King Alfred retaliates by having the bell rung, signaling war and to attack Eivor on sight. Eivor heads to Kent to obtain some plans for Valka's next potion, a St. John's wort and fireweed. He returns to Valka and she brews the potion. Eivor drinks it and he's transported to Jotunheim. Harvey meets with Angerboda and she wonders of Basim's presence. Harvey tells her he's back at Asgard helping rebuild the damage from the recent attack, but she calls him a filthy liar. Harvey talks about the Jotnar magic when Hyrrokin says it's the mead you seek. Harvey questions Angerboda on the mead, but she refuses to entertain such a topic, until a price is mentioned. Angerboda speaks on a root called Hag's Claw, and if Harvey can find said ingredient, then he can learn more of this mead. Harvey enters the waterfall and finds the roots. He gets out of the cave and returns to her. He brews an elixir that opens your mind to the secrets of the world. While waiting for it to kick in, she asks him about Asgard's recent attack and how their defenses were. Harvey attempts to lie and say their defenses were impenetrable, but the elixir makes him tell the truth and say it was too much for them to handle. She continues asking him how far he'd go to be freed of fate's shackles, giving his tongue, hand and sights. Harvey responds agreeing to all of the above. Then all of a sudden, Loki shows up, and it seems to be revealed Angerboda gave Harvey a truth elixir so he can get to the bottom of what happened. Harvey reveals his fated death to Loki's son Fenrir before Loki asks what he's going to do with him. Harvey says without hesitation that he wants to murder him, but he won't because of an oath he swore to Loki and will stay imprisoned until the day of prophecy. Harvey passes out and wakes up to find himself hanging from a tree. Hyrrokin frees him before he slides his way into talking to her about the mead. She's willing to help him get it if she gets a small sample for herself. She reveals the mead is kept by the king of Jotunheim, Suttunga, and his daughter Gunloda, in their vault at their home in Utgard. The vault is only open during the event of a great feast when Suttunga shares the bounty of his cellar, but in order to get in, he'll have to earn his welcome. Hyrrokin mentions Suttunga's cauldron he recently won in a wager disappeared on the way to Utgard. If he can bring it back to him, he would be eternally grateful. She concludes the conversation saying to meet her at the well once he has the mead, where she'll show him how to escape his doom with Ragnarok. Harvey finds the cauldron's trail and investigates the crash site. He finds that something huge was dragged, a dug ditch so the cart would break, leading to it being a planned attack, and another cart with a sign of Aegir. He further explores the trail and stumbles upon Skrymir's mitten. He enters and finds the cauldron. Before he heads back, he wants to get a gift for Gunloda to improve his chances of getting the mead. He searches for a present and finds Thor's bridal circlet. He heads to Utgard and speaks to Suttunga. He introduces himself and gives him the cauldron that was lost in travel. Harvey earns his welcome and Suttunga calls for a feast. Harvey also asks to meet his daughter Gunloda, who isn't opposed to the idea, but she isn't too fond of having visitors. Harvey proposes to invite her to the feast, which Suttunga welcomes the idea with open arms. He gives her location and he heads there to find her. He follows her to Utgard, returning to Suttunga, who tells him he's already brought the mead out. Gunloda tells her father she doesn't want to participate in the feast, but he insists she enjoy herself. Harvey makes a speech to make the Jotnars less uneasy. Harvey learns there is still plenty of mead to be consumed before more can be brought out, so he talks to a bunch of the guests to get them to drink, going as far as jumping into the mead itself to retrieve a stolen harp and finding an old lady to get them drinking. Once the cauldron is empty, he informs Suttunga, who is in disbelief, and instructs Gunloda to open the vault and retrieve more. She reluctantly agrees and Harvey makes his way towards the vault. He runs into Gunloda and he says he had to see her. Gunloda sees through his lies, however, and realizes he's really only here for the mead. While being chased, he finds the mead and takes a sample of it. He heads to the well to meet Hyrrokin, but as he leaves the vault, he's met with the presence of Suttunga and Loki. Loki seems to have informed Suttunga of the real reason Harvey is there, and Suttunga wasn't too pleased to hear that. Harvey and Suttunga battle when Suttunga is defeated. He heads towards the well when Loki makes an appearance on the way. Harvey calls him an oathbreaker, but Loki simply did to him what Harvey did to his son. Loki fires back again, saying Harvey stole the mead, but he did it for the safety of all of Asgard. When Loki replies out of frustration, but not for me or the Jotnars, Harvey quickly replies saying, why would I do it for them when you let them in Asgard and attack our home, also you could smuggle in Fenrir. Harvey keeps his promise on not harming Fenrir, but Loki wants him free or he has no choice but to fight Harvey. Harvey and Loki battle when Harvey defeats him and tells him to leave and never show his face again. Finally, Harvey gets inside the well and meets Hyrrokin. The keeper of the well, Mimir, begins talking and says if you seek immortality within the waters, there is a price to pay. The waters of the well must know you, so he has to surrender a part of himself that contains the Aesir blood and then add some of the contaminated well water to the mead to have true immortality. Remembering from a past conversation with Angerboda, Harvey surrenders his eyeball and collects the water for the mead. Eivor wakes up from the dream and explains everything that he saw to Valka, but he's not done yet. Something is telling him to return to Asgard. Eivor heads inside the longhouse and is told Sigurd wants to speak with him by Randvi. Sigurd tells Eivor he believes his time is up and wants to go to Valhalla. Eivor refuses to be the one to slay him, but Sigurd fires back saying, "I don't speak of death, I speak of an everlasting glory and life." Sigurd requests Eivor to come to Norway with him to bid farewell to his father and achieve his destiny. Before he does that, he checks in on Randvi, who says she's fine but a little tired. Eivor offers to take her out for some air, but Randvi responds unsure. Eivor offers again to take her for a ride somewhere nearby for a change of pace. Randvi expresses appreciation for the offer but kindly declines. Eivor doubles down and says, "Now let's go." Eivor takes Randvi to Grandabridge and speaks to Magni. They learn the town is in trouble by bandits who have a camp nearby, terrorizing the merchants who wander nearby. And with word spreading, no merchant wants to leave, which is hurting their income line. And to make matters worse, Magni's horse was stolen by the bandits. Randvi accepts the offer to help and they head to the camp and eradicate the bandits, taking back Magni's horse and returning to him. Magni expresses gratitude to the pair. Randvi calls on Eivor to a drinking contest and he loses. She has one more request and wants to see the sunken tower. Eivor takes her there and they climb up the tower to get a better view from the top. The pair share a moment and Randvi thanks Eivor for taking her out before going in to kiss him. Eivor questions her and she immediately apologizes. She comes clean and expresses feelings for Eivor. Eivor returns the feeling, but as a friend, since Sigurd is his brother. Randvi understands and apologizes once again, with Eivor saying it stays between us. Eivor heads to the docks to meet Sigurd and says he's ready to leave for Norway. They arrive and Sigurd speaks to his father Styrbjorn. His father is happy to see him and warrants concern for Sigurd's missing arm. He further continues calling for a celebration for their arrival, but Sigurd makes it clear they're here for one reason: to say goodbye and thanks for being such a failure. Because without it, he wouldn't have figured out his true self. Styrbjorn fires back saying he pledged an oath to King Harald to maintain peace within the country. They conclude the conversation and say goodbye. Before they set sail, Eivor and Sigurd both share visions, and Eivor tells Sigurd what he was foretold in regard to him betraying Sigurd. They set sail and head to the northernmost fjord. Departing, they end up in this location and find an ice cave. Venturing through the ice cave, they come across the entrance to the Isu temple. Sigurd closes his eyes and starts speaking a certain language which unlocks the door. They head inside and discover the Tree of Life. They notice someone else was there before them, before they are both hooked up to the Tree of Life. They are transported to Valhalla where they experience endless battles. After some time, Eivor realizes they're in a simulation and requests Sigurd to leave with him to England, but he refuses. After some persuading, Sigurd eventually accepts, but Odin doesn't take too kindly to this and knocks him out. Eivor wakes up and Odin walks him through the various memories of Eivor, trying to convince him to stay. Eivor refuses to stay and become Odin. He continues resisting Odin and is successful in his attempt, waking up in the Tree of Life. He notices Sigurd is gone and is taken by Basim. Basim starts saying to Eivor that it's him he's been looking for all along, and out of nowhere attacks him for what he did to his son. Eivor, confused, battles him and defeats him before hooking him up to the Tree of Life, not before stabbing Eivor. Eivor and Sigurd talk for the final time when Sigurd transfers leadership to Eivor and appoints him the new leader of the Raven clan. In present day, Layla wakes up from the Animus and they come to the conclusion that the strengthening magnetic field is a result of Desmond's activation of the Isu towers in 2012. In order to stabilize it, Layla heads to Norway with the staff. She gets the door open to the Isu temple and heads inside. She enters the simulation and ventures through the Valhalla simulation before meeting Basim. She discovers it was him that led them to find Eivor. He tells her how to stabilize the magnetic field, but doing so frees Basim and traps Layla. Continuing on, a tree springs out and she encounters someone called the Reader. She agrees to work with him to prevent future disaster, allowing her mortal body to die. While that was happening, Basim wakes up and possesses the staff of Hermes, containing the consciousness of Loki's lover Alethea. He escapes the temple and meets Sean and Rebecca. He requests to meet their mentor William Miles in person. When they leave, Basim checks out Eivor's grave and vows to find his family. Basim goes back into the Animus and Eivor drinks the elixir to transport him back to Asgard. Harvey heads back to Asgard from Jotunheim and is greeted by Ivaldi, who says the chain is ready and gives it to him. He notices Harvey's eye missing but says it's a tale for another time. Ivaldi talks about the cord and its capabilities, mentioning the cord will stretch or tighten to fit his needs, before doubling down saying the more he tightens the cord, the more it will hurt. Harvey speaks to Tyr and immediately notices his missing eye. Harvey says it was for a sacrifice and inquires about the wolf Fenrir. Tyr tells him the wolf has grown so much and becoming so strong he's basically immortal. Until Harvey shows him the cord that Ivaldi forged and tells Tyr to convince him to wear it. Tyr stands across from Fenrir's hideout and attempts to convince him to wear it by saying the Aesir fear him. He resists until Harvey gives him a choice: wear the collar or return to Jotunheim. Tyr attempts to convince him to wear it once again and pledges an oath that he'll be safe once he wears it, doubling down by putting his hand in Fenrir's mouth. But Harvey puts the cord on him and it burns him. He refuses to take it off, which leads to Fenrir throwing Tyr across the way, biting off his arm. Fenrir gets angry but is defeated by Harvey once again and is binded to save Harvey from his own fate. Ragnarok comes, but with Harvey obtaining the mead from Jotunheim, he cheats his fate to death with the other Aesir and drink the mead to become immortal and reincarnate themselves. Harvey forbids Loki doing the same thing due to being betrayed by him, and they head into Ragnarok. Eivor wakes up and tells Valka everything that happened. He begins to make sense of the visions from what she originally foretold of Eivor, and says Odin saw Eivor as a fit to reincarnate into and gift him infinite knowledge and a treasure of his experience. She further explains his tale to be a warning to not go down the same path. To finish his journey of conquering England, Eivor heads to Hamptonshire to assist Guthrum and Ubba on the Battle of Wessex and King Alfred. They burn villages and free the other Danes. Guthrum and Eivor speak when Guthrum notices his changed demeanour since the last time they spoke and praises him for it. Eivor heads to the camp and rallies his allies, storming King Alfred's fortress. He gets inside and calls for Alfred, but he's gone, instead dealing with Goodwin. They go back and forth until they decide to just duke it out like men. Eivor battles Goodwin and defeats him. Eivor heads outside to Soma, fending off Alfred's men, but the pressure gets too much and she is slain. Eivor helps his allies secure Wessex and, once successful, returns to Guthrum and breaks the news about Soma. They hold a funeral where they give her a proper send-off to Valhalla. Eivor has officially conquered all of England but isn't king yet. Eivor takes down the Order, even heading to Vinland for one specific member until the head is left. He returns to Hytham, giving him the rest of the Order medallions. He then finds out he has a letter requesting Eivor's presence in a village called Athelney by yet again the poor fellow soldier of Christ. Eivor heads to the town of Athelney and meets King Alfred. He mentions Alfred sending himself a letter in Winchester. Alfred explains he had to be careful since the Order wanted him dead. Eivor and King Alfred go for a walk, just casually talking, but Eivor gets to the point and wants to know who's behind all these Order shenanigans. But then Alfred pulls out some silver token, handing it to Eivor, admitting defeat, revealing himself to be the leader of the Order and the alias poor fellow soldier of Christ. He goes on to explain he didn't want the title of being the leader, but it was passed down from his brother when he passed away. But because of their differences in beliefs, he set a plan with Goodwin to destroy the Order from within, but his troubles with the Danes delayed that plan until Eivor came in and took care of things anyway. Alfred takes some inspiration from Eivor and sets a plan for a new idea to take the Order's place since it's not completely destroyed. With the main story and connecting plot points uncovered, it's time to get into some things behind the main game and figure out why the things that happened. So the main story ending probably left some plot holes for you if you weren't paying attention. Even I was confused by this line from Basim until I realized something. Basim, Sigurd and Eivor are reincarnations of the Norse gods. Basim is Loki, Sigurd is Tyr, and Eivor is Odin. You can already put the pieces together here, but an extensive piece of lore confirming this is in Assassin's Creed Mirage, where the game is about Loki reincarnating into Basim and Basim having his memories, which is why Basim attacked Eivor, because Odin betrayed Loki by attacking his son Fenrir, and was on a path of revenge to murder Odin by any means necessary. If you don't know, Ragnarok is the Norse version of the end of the world. This is why when Odin is foretold of Ragnarok and his impending doom to Fenrir and Ragnarok, he decided to become selfish and take matters into his own hands to make sure he cheats his fate, hence why Loki's son Fenrir was attacked, and as a consequence of his selfishness, he lost Loki as a brother. But there's a correlation because the visions of Ragnarok that Eivor was having are the same visions of the great catastrophe from the Isus before the human race was almost wiped out. Yes, once you complete the anomalies of the Animus and obtain the video fragments, a video plays which shows more of the Norse gods before Ragnarok struck, and when Odin had forbade Loki to reincarnate with the rest of the Aesir. Once they left, Loki went up behind one of the AC and murdered them, taking their spot and getting his immortality to face Ragnarok as well. Odin and Loki had both betrayed each other by that point anyway, so this doesn't shock me, more just makes me laugh. Loki had intent behind it though. He reincarnated into Basim and sought revenge on Odin, who was Eivor, for betraying him for imprisoning and torturing his son Fenrir. I tried my best to filter through as much of the bloat as I could, so if you made it this far and you enjoyed, please be sure to leave a like and subscribe if you're new for more content like this. This is definitely my biggest video project so far, so again, I hope you enjoyed. Anyway, that's it from me. I will see you legends in the next one. Peace.